The Star Sport podcast is brought to you by Access Credit Union. Access Credit Union, funding dreams for over 50 years.
Close your eyes and pull like a dog.
And a new Irish record for Phil Healy, 22.99.
Christy Cooney hands over the Sam Maguire Cup to Graham Canty, Cork All-Ireland champions for the 7th time ever.
Hello and welcome to the Star Sport podcast. My name is Dylan Mangan of the Southern Star and I'm joined by Star Sport editor Kieran McCarthy. Before we get into things, I'd just like to give our listeners a gentle reminder to please rate, review and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify and YouTube. And the Star Sport podcast, as always, is brought to you in association with our friends at Access Credit Union. Access Credit Union, where your bank really does matter. Choose credit union, choose local, choose community. Now, our guest on this week's podcast is 8-time All-Ireland winning footballer Ciara O'Sullivan, who joined Kieran to chat about the ongoing protests by inter-county ladies footballers and camogie players who are fighting for minimum standards of player welfare to be introduced across the board. And Ciara joined to explain why they're protesting, the progress so far, and what they're hoping for in the future in what is quite a fluid situation, as we'll explain later on as well. But first things first, we're going to switch things up very slightly here, as I usually leave this part to the end of the podcast, but not everyone makes it all the way to the end, Kieran, and we want as many people to know that we're running a special offer on our premium subscription for West Cork sports fans and podcast listeners. So over the coming weeks and months, we'll have tons of great coverage of the county championships. And if you sign up for a monthly or annual subscription, you can get 50% off your first 2 months, which will give you full access to all the articles on southernstar.ie and the weekly e-paper every Thursday morning, which is the best place to read about your local club's fortunes this year. 50% off works out at €4 a month or just €1 a week for the 8 weeks of the offer, Kieran. So €1 a week, the only place to get the best West Cork sports news and match reports. So all listeners need to do is enter the code on your screen now if you're watching on YouTube or in the description of wherever you're listening to the podcast at the moment. And for full details on the offer, head to southernstar.ie/offers. And to subscribe, go to subscribe.southernstar.ie. Now, with all of that out of the way, Kieran, let's get on to this week's West Cork Sport Roundup, starting with Plunkets, who are halfway to a double in football and hurling after they beat Ballyphehane in the Bonsecours confined County Junior B Football Championship final at Parky Ring on Saturday afternoon. And obviously, Kieran, it's a great result for Plunkets against a Ballyphehane team who were going for back-to-back county titles.
These Plunket lads, they're halfway towards immortality. They're we're at now. It's Wednesday of this week. We're midway between the two county finals. So Plunkets have the County Junior B football title in the bag. They're going for the County Junior B hurling title this weekend. So it could be an incredible double for Plunkets. But first off, huge win, brilliant win against Ballyphehane, won by a point. And it's probably no surprise that Plunkets are digging out tight results as well, because if you look at both their hurling and football semi-finals, they won both by a point as well. So that tells you a lot about the character and resilience of this group, that when the going gets tough, Plunkets get going and they get the results that they want. So looking at last weekend, it was Padraig Healy who got Plunkets off the fast start. He got a first-minute goal. And I said on Twitter, Dylan, it's probably no surprise that it was Padraig who got Plunkets off the fast start, because his sisters are two of the fastest women in Ireland, Phil and Joan Healy. And actually, just a quick plug for a piece that's in this Thursday Southern Star. I actually catch up with Padraig Healy for a chat about what it was like growing up with his two speedster sisters. And an interesting fact as well for our podcast listeners, when Padraig was a young fella, he won the under-13 All-Ireland 100-metre national title without any training. So speed is obviously in the family. They have those fast twitch fibre muscles. But back to Plunkets for a second. Huge win, massive win. So they have that county title in the bag. It's the third time they've won it. the first time, I think, since 2007. So they're now going for the double this weekend. So a fierce, exciting time to be a Plunkett's player or supporter.
Absolutely. And we'll be reporting on that game in next week's Southern Star as well. And in rowing, Skibbereen Rowing Club once again highlighted they are the club to beat after a dominant showing at the Irish Rowing Championships, Kieran. They are the most successful rowing club in the country, and they've kind of extended their lead out front with their national titles up to 195 now. Is that right?
That's exactly it. So they rubber stamped their position as the #1 club in the country and the dominant force in domestic rowing. So Skibbereen Rowers won 5 Irish Championship titles at the Champs in Ascara last weekend. The weather did affect the Champs, especially on the Friday when a lot of the racing had to be pushed back into the Saturday. So it was a very condensed championships, but that didn't stop Skibbereen Rowers. So they had some brilliant performances, and we've a full page in Thursday Southern Star with a really comprehensive report from Niamh Casey and Emily Delore, who take us through the weekend. But some of the headlines are that Caoimhe Casey won the lightweight women's single, and it was her first ever championship title, while her brother Dominic Casey he teamed up with Cathal McCarthy and they won in the men's junior pair. And that's just 2 of the 5 national titles that the Skibbereen Rowers won. And why I picked those 2, Dylan, Caoimhe and Dominic Casey's championship wins, is that now the Casey family, from Dad Dominic, Mom Eleanor, to Aoife, who's an Olympian, to older sister Niamh, now Caoimhe and Dominic Jr., they have all won Irish Rowing Championship titles. In fact, combined, they've won 39 altogether, and that places them 14th in the overall roll of honour in Irish rowing. So let's say that the Casey family from Affadown, that they were a rowing club. They're now the 14th most successful rowing club in the country, because they've won 13 Irish Rowing Championship titles together, which is a phenomenal record. So it just goes to show again about the strength, the heritage and tradition of rowing around Skibbereen and this area. We all know Dominic Casey now is the coach of the Irish lightweight group, men's and women's, and he's had incredible success there. But as a rower himself, he won 8 Irish senior titles back in the 80s. But the bragging rights in the family go to Aoife, who has won 13, which is 1 ahead of Niamh. So that's a bit of sport and trivia for our podcast listeners this week. But like I said, Dylan, we have a full page with a really comprehensive roundup in Thursday Star.
That'll be a great table quiz question in West Cork pub quizzes in years to come. How or where in the rowing list are the Caseys? It's 14th, so I'm going to write that one down and remember it for future reference. And moving on to Nicola Tuthill, we've spoken about her a lot on the podcast this year. She's had a great year, the women's hammer thrower, and she added to her growing reputation with a 4th place finish at the European Under-23 Championships in Finland. And Kieran, it's a great performance from her, especially considering she's 19 and this is her first year competing at this level as well.
That's exactly it. And we've said it before with Nicola, the best is yet to come. And we're saying that while she's actually doing incredible things at the moment as well. Like, I think it's 3 or 4 PBs that she's thrown this year. And her latest PB was at the European Team Championships in Poland, which was her first senior international event. And she showed there that there's no stage fright whatsoever. She was really impressive there. And again, in Finland, late last week, she was very impressive as well. So on the Thursday in the qualifying round, with her first throw, she achieved what she needed to do. So she booked her place in the final. And then in the final, I was watching it on streaming it on Friday evening. There was a couple of rounds, Dylan, where Nicola was actually in the middle places. Like, she was second, she was third, and we're thinking, here we go, because she was on for something special, considering she was telling me last week, I think she was ranked 9th coming into these European under 23, so she wasn't expected to be in contention for a medal, but she ended up finishing 4th, which is a really impressive performance. And she said so herself after, 4th is a tough place to finish because you're just outside the medals, but considering where she's coming from, she was really pleased with her performance, because like you said, she's only 19. She's a lot more champs to come. She'll be back at European Under-23s again. She's the Irish senior nationals coming up at the end of the month. So another another big event to prepare for. But it's been a really impressive year so far for Nicola Tuttle, and she's not finished yet. And just to give a quick mention too to Jane Buckley from Newcestown, who was the other West Cork athlete in action at the European Under-23s. And in the women's 5,000 metre final on Thursday, she finished 9th. Again, it was a good performance from Jane, coming off the back of a really successful freshman year at Providence College over in Rhode Island. And it was a very tactical race where around the 3,000 metres in that the top few women took off. But Jane was saying after she was pleased with her 9th place, but she knows that there's more to come as well. So it was a very good and very solid outing for the two local women.
Yeah, proving once again that West Cork, the athlete factory that they have, or we have down here, is in good health. And we're going to take a very quick break now, and we'll be back to hear from Ciara O'Sullivan about the ongoing protests from ladies footballers and camogie players, and to explain a little bit about how fluid a situation it is as well.
The Star Sport podcast is brought to you by Access Credit Union. Access Credit Union, funding dreams for over 50 years.
Now, welcome back to the Star Sport podcast, and we'll be hearing from Ciara O'Sullivan in just a moment. But first, Kieran, let's give a little bit of context to this chat with Ciara, because obviously a month ago to the day, it was the 19th of June, when the GPA released a statement confirming that or saying that the players would be playing the rest of the season under protest. And since then, there have been a lot of different developments in this situation. And Ciara joined us to talk about why, maybe the players' perspective. But could you give a little bit of context into where this situation is at as we speak today?
Yeah, like you said, Dylan, it's a very fluid situation and it's changing all the time. We've had so many different statements, even in the last week alone, from the various parties in this, which would be the GEA, the LGFA, which is the Ladies Gaelic Football Association, and the Camogie Association. So this is kind of this story is evolving all the time. So basically what it is that the women's footballers and the camogie counterparts, they joined forces to air their frustration and vent their frustration at the lack of progress when it comes to putting together a female player charter for 2024. And people will ask, okay, what is this female player charter? So what they're looking for is minimum standards right across the board, no matter if you're a senior intercounty player with Cork or if you're a junior intercounty player. So they're just looking to raise the standards right across ladies football and camogie. And Ciara will get into that in a couple of minutes in terms of telling us what these issues are. It's such as getting food after training sessions, expenses, even when it comes to gear. So what we think would be almost done things when it comes to intercounty GA, women's GA, it really isn't the case. So that's what they're fighting for. They want the implementation of this female player charter for 2024, but they have been frustrated by the lack of progress or the slow progress by their own two associations, the LGFA and the Camogie Association. But almost just to counteract that by saying this is changing all the time. So by the time you listen to this podcast or by the end of the week, it could have changed again. But we're kind of very much dealing in the here and now as to where this stands. So the players want this charter. That's why these protests are going on. And we're seeing them before all the intercounty games in the last couple of weeks, with a story in the Star 2 weeks ago when the Cork footballers, they were playing Tipperary and Clonakilty, they wore T-shirts with #United for Equality on the front of it. It's very interesting. Last weekend in the Cork Armagh All-Ireland Ladies Football quarter-final, that both teams had that #United for Equality logo actually on their jerseys. That was for more visibility because it was live to televised games. We've also seen ladies football and camogie players pull out of the media days for their own associations in the lead up to the semi-finals and finals of both the camogie and football. So again, that was to show that their own associations were really frustrated here. We mean business. Please, can you get together and sort this out for us? Otherwise, we could see a possibility where protests are cranked up even more. I did see Tom Parsons, GP from the GPA, say earlier this week that they're pleased with the progress, that the protests are working to an extent because they are getting reactions off both associations, and the GAA have said as well that they're waiting to be supposed to be asked to help out in terms of this female player charter, and they'll play their part as well. So again, a lot happening. So it's a huge story, Dylan, when it comes to ladies GAA, because when you look at the men's side of the game and compare it to the women's side of the game, the women are dead right, 100% right to kind of put their hands up and say, what we're seeing now is not good enough and we want change.
Yeah, it's a huge story as well, because like you say, I guess what they're asking for they're not asking for the world, they're just asking for an equal standing. Like they're not saying let's get 5-star hotels for every away game and all this kind of thing. They're asking for things like physios and food after games, which should be, you would think, just like standard across the board. And I guess it kind of highlights, or the slow progress, I guess, kind of highlights once again the need for integration between the associations to happen as soon as it can, because from our point of view, I guess, the reason behind the slow progress is the lack of communication between associations, like we saw with the dual player issue earlier in the season as well.
Exactly that. And just on that integration, we're recording this podcast on Wednesday, and just before we start to record, and Dylan, joint statement from the GAA, the LGFA and the Camogie Association, and it's about a steering group on integration that they've announced the research for. So I'm just going to read just the first couple of parts here for our listeners. So it's saying the Gaelic Games Association's steering group on integration has commissioned a landmark research study to gauge the opinions of members to assist in developing the pathway to integration. The steering group is working towards the establishment of this pathway by February 2024. It goes on to say this study has the potential to be one of the largest of its kind ever carried out in Irish sport, and the purpose of the research will be to seek opinions on the implications of integration from regular club members. And among the questions it seeks to establish are: what priorities should be the focus after integration? What benefits do members feel will arise out of this project from an organisational point of view and an individual and personal perspective? What challenges or issues are members concerned about? So it seems that this move towards integration is starting to step up in speed, which is good to see, but it's just another step along the road. This is the announcement of a research study, so that's going to take time itself. This isn't going to happen overnight. It's not like it's a very much a slow burner. And again, we'll hear from Ciara O'Sullivan quite soon, and she thinks that in her playing days, it's not going to happen. You know, she can't see it happening while she's still playing. But hopefully it is going to happen at some point, and the sooner the better, because the sooner the three associations can come under, or I suppose the two, LGFA and Camogie, can come under that GAA umbrella, it's just for the betterment of the sport, and it should put everyone in on an equal standing. So we'll just have to see how this one plays out. But as you'll hear from Ciara O'Sullivan now, she starts off by explaining to us the reason why football players and camogie players felt that they needed to start this protest back in mid-June. It was on June 19th that the first statement dropped, and it was a statement that caught a lot of people's attention, that joint statement from the intercounty camogie and football panels saying that you're going to play the remainder of the 2023 championship under protest. But take us back to the reason why you feel that now was a time to put forward a statement.
Well, I suppose the ask from the players across male and female is very simple, and it is an ask to have the three associations, so the LGFA, the Camogie and the GAA, work together and work with the players to ensure that there is a charter in place for 2024 for minimum standards and welfare for all female players. And I suppose that the decision was made in, as you say, early June to come out and say we'd be playing under protest, I suppose, until we saw some action or some way forward in making this a reality. And while the GAA have come out last week and said they'd be willing to work together if asked, you know, that's a great development from our point of view, and we thank the GAA for that. But I suppose it's kind of back over to the LGFA. the camogie, to see if they're willing to engage and work with players and with the GA to implement that charter.
Was the reason for this first statement, did it come from almost a point of frustration from the players? Because like you spoke there about integration and the female player charter for 2024, but from the original statement, it seemed like this just wasn't happening at the pace that the associations were currently working at.
Yeah, it hasn't, I suppose. And, you kind of get to the stage where you kind of feel like you're beating the same drum and, you're not getting any results. And it was kind of a case of, well, if we keep going down the same road and nothing's being done, we'll be here in 12 months' time just talking about it as well. And we'll have had made no progress. So I suppose the protest was to try and get some action and try and incentivize the three associations to take us seriously and to listen and actually do something about the frustrations that the players are experiencing.
I suppose there's a couple of different points to this, but first the female player charter, you want this to establish minimum standards for the players' collective welfare. Can you tell us a small bit more about the female player charter and what you hope it would include?
Yeah, like some of the stuff that we're hoping it would include might sound very basic, but I think we have to remember that we're looking for this across the board, like whether it's junior, senior, Division 1, Division 4. We want this for all ladies teams. So the kind of things we're talking about is access to physio, having food after training, getting gear, having consistent gear, travel expenses, stuff like that. So while we're very, very lucky in Cork and very fortunate to have a brilliant county board and really good sponsors in SuperValu, we get a lot of what's being asked for in that charter. Not all of it, but we do get a lot of it. So, it'd be easy for us to say we're okay, thanks, but it's not about any one individual team. It's about female sport collectively, and we want to support those who don't have those standards at the moment. And as I said, while we have most in Cork, we don't have everything. We don't get travel expenses, or we don't have a consistent place where we train every week. So we are very lucky, but there's still room for improvement. But we're probably at the top end of the scale in terms of what we get relative to other female teams. So it is about kind of the collective and raising the standards across the board.
Even when you talk there, Ciara, getting food after training in this day and age, you would think that would be just a done deal, a done thing for whatever grade we're talking about.
Yeah, you kind of would. And like, you've people traveling, from college, from work, and it's the same for all counties. You'd have people playing, or working or living in Dublin and coming down to Cork for training. And you could be, you could have certain teams who are leaving without having eaten after training, and you're going up and stopping in the shop and stuff like that. So it really isn't ideal. And I suppose we were, I've been playing with Cork a good while, and the standards have increased and players are very well looked after now. But, there was times when we had Frankie Honan single-handedly made the food for all of us after training, made soups, scones, etc. So, we have food after training now, every single training we have, but that's not the case for all teams. And as you say, it is something that sounds quite basic, but it's not there, and it's kind of making people aware of these things is what the protest is about.
And this protest is ongoing. Like I said, I think the first statement was June 19th, and we've seen it the last couple of weeks before games. There's the white t-shirts with the hashtag United for Equality, that slogan on it. We saw the weekend against Armagh. It was actually on the back of the Cork and Armagh jerseys, that slogan. So what was that about the weekend? Was it just kind of cranking up another small bit in terms of visibility?
Exactly, it is all about visibility. And I suppose we use the platform of having had those 4 quarterfinals on TV as well, and you kind of want to maximise that and make the most of getting your message across. So I do think people are very supportive of the protest, and even when we wore those t-shirts for the warm-up, and then we ran in back into the dressing room with Armagh, and the crowd were on their feet clapping both teams in. So I think people are really supportive of it, but we just, with having it on the jerseys this week, it's about not forgetting it and not having it be a 10-minute thing before the match, and that it's something that needs to be on people's minds consistently. And I suppose that was the focus of putting it on the jerseys this week, just as you say, to kind of crank it up a notch.
Do you feel this protest is having the impact that you hoped it would have?
I do, in the sense that, already the GA coming out and saying that they would be willing to work towards a charter. So that's one out of three, and I suppose it's one that we didn't have before the protest. So in that sense, you could say it is working, but for it to fully work, and for us to have been successful with it, we need the LGFA and the Camogie Association to engage and to commit as well. So it has had an impact, and it has had part of the desired result, but not all the way there yet.
I know, like in the last couple of weeks, we've had a lot of statements. The LGFA and the Camogie Association had statements on Friday. But is it disappointing that the two organisations that are over the games, the LGFA and the Camogie Association, haven't been maybe more proactive in this?
It is, because I don't think it's something that came out of nowhere. As I say, we maybe felt we were banging the same drum for a while. Players have been vocal about the standards in female sport and in camogie and ladies football for a number of years. So the pace of action on those two associations isn't where I think it should be, or where we'd like it to be. So it is frustrating as a player. And even something like, I went to the under-16 All-Ireland final yesterday, and like the location of that match for an All-Ireland final, like you just would not see it in the men's game. For the players to travel and be playing in those kind of standards, like it's like we're in 2023, and it just didn't feel like it yesterday for that All-Ireland final. So things like that are happening every day. So that does kind of add to the frustrations of the players. And we're protesting as senior players, but you're doing it on behalf of, obviously, our current players, but the players of the future, and those under 16 players, for example. So I think the lack of pace by those two associations is very frustrating for us as players.
And you mentioned one word at the start of our conversation, integration, and this has been on the table for a long time now, bringing the three associations, or bringing the LGFA and the Camogie Association under the GA umbrella. This is a slow burner again, and this is almost central to what this protest is about as well. So what are your thoughts on that? Like, can you see it happening while you're still playing, Ciara? Are we talking about, is this 5-10 years down the line, or what are we talking about here? Because there seems to be very little movement, well, from the outside looking in.
Yeah, I definitely can't see it happening while I'm playing, to be honest. Now, that hopefully has more to do with the fact that I'm 33 this year, rather than the pace that they're going at. But it is hugely frustrating. And I suppose, like, I've spoken about how we're lucky in Cork in one sense in the standards, but where we're not lucky in Cork is the fact that we've very talented dual players. And I know it's long publicised now, but the dual clashes that we had earlier in the year, like, that wouldn't happen under the one association. So for us, that's another big factor of having this integration, to have 4 girls who are talented enough to make one inter-county team, let alone 2, and be forced to pick between camogie and football on 2 separate occasions and have to go 2 and 2. It's just so unfair. And I don't want to harp on about it now, because look, they're behind us now and there's no more clashes going forward in the year. But just to the point of integration, that would be a huge one for us in Cork, to help those girls. And they're like, there'll be plenty more of them coming up, because on every Cork underage panel there's people dueling on camogie and ladies football, which is an unbelievable achievement and something you wouldn't like to see go. But if we keep going with the association separately, it's hard to see how that would continue.
I saw, last week too, another statement dropped that inter-county female players have decided not to take part in media events organised by the LGFA or Camogie Association in advance of games in the closing stages of the All-Ireland Championships. So that's obviously in media days organised by both associations. Players won't be there. Is that just another part, almost kind of like you said, banging that drum? Is like, please take us serious. Like, we're really serious about what we're saying here.
Yeah, exactly. Like, please listen to us. That's a huge, those days are the captain's days before All-Ireland finals and stuff, are a huge kind of selling point for the LGFA and the Camogie Association to promote the game. But I suppose we're hoping that because they're normally such a big deal, like, our commitment to not take part in them will make them realise just how serious we are, and how strongly we feel about what we're asking. And I suppose that it's not going to go away. It's not going to be a case of us protesting for a few weeks, nothing happened, it didn't work, and we give up. That's not going to be the case. So it is just, again, stepping it up a notch, asking them to take us seriously and to listen to our requests.
It sounds like you're in this for the long run, Ciara. Let's look past this season. If there's no change, how can you crank up the protest even more? What's the next step?
Yeah, like I don't want to speak on behalf of like the GPA Association, I suppose, and what they have planned, because I don't know. Like, there is weekly meetings with the players and a representation of a representative from each team. But I suppose you would be looking at, you wouldn't do it for the end of this championship or anything like that, but you'd be looking at maybe not fulfilling league fixtures next year. I don't know. As I say, I don't want to speak on behalf of the GPA, but it is going to have to keep being kind of cranked up if no action is taken. So we really, really hope that it just doesn't come to that and it can get resolved this year, and just commitment this year to put a charter in place for 2024.
And that is the hope. So if the LGFA and the Camogie Association can come together to get this charter ready for 2024, that would be a huge step forward.
It would be massive, and you'd be going in the right direction. And like for players across the country to have that certainty of knowing that next year we will have a physio available, we will have meals after training, and like it encourages people to go for county trials, to play with your county, because there's people like across the country. I'd say every female intercounty player is massively out of pocket for playing with their county, and I just really don't think that should be the case. Like, it obviously is a great honor, but it's also a huge commitment and sacrifice, and to be financially out of pocket for it is something that I don't think happens in the men, so I don't see why it should happen in the ladies.
And again, is that why integration is so important? Because you'll hear people put forward the argument, Ciara, that the LGFA doesn't generate enough money to pay players' expenses. So it's kind of all connected in one sense.
Yeah, it is all connected, and like I do take that argument and that point, that obviously the revenue in the GA would be far greater than the LGFA, but I think if everyone's willing to work together, there's ways there's ways to make that work, and it mightn't be straight away, and it mightn't be a simple fix, but I think it's just a willingness to work together and see what can be done, because at the moment we're not even there. There's no integration, there's no willingness to work together. So it's impossible to say what can or can't be done, because we haven't even got that far.
And before I finish up, just to ask about expenses. In terms of players' expenses in the women's game, they don't exist today.
No, there is a GPA grant that you claim once a year. So you put in obviously the amount of trainings, etc. You've done, the gym sessions, etc., and players get the same amount across the board. So that came in, I think, the last 2 years. So I think this is my 16th year playing, and I think it's been in place the last 2 years. So I've no idea in terms of rates or what that is like in comparison to the men, but yeah, even that is a welcome change from the years before that.
But it's even bottom line again, you shouldn't be out of pocket playing for your county.
No, definitely not. And like, as I said, we've had people for years coming from Dublin, from work or college in Dublin, in Limerick, and it's just, it does cost. Like, you're driving down the road 3-4 nights a week for training and back up again. And as I said, it is a great honor, but that only takes it so far, to be out of pocket and to be having to leave work early, etc., to do that, and not be getting anything in terms of mileage is a bit unfair, I think.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us, and best of luck with Cork in the weeks ahead. I know you have a huge game against Dublin on the weekend after this, so good luck with that.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Kieran.
The Star Sport podcast is brought to you by Access Credit Union. Access Credit Union, funding dreams for over 50 years.
Now, welcome back once again to the Star Sport podcast, and it's that time in the week where we take a look at what's coming up in this week's Southern Star Sport. Kieran, what are readers in for this week?
I'm like a broken record every week, Dylan, but this is a really good Southern Star Sports section. So I urge our listeners, get out and get your Star, whether it's in the shop or online on Thursday, because there's something there for everyone. First off, for anyone with any association with St. Oliver Plunkets, you need to get Thursday Star, because it's a keepsake. We have a double page spread right in the middle of the sports section with a match report from the County Junior B final win last weekend. Interview with Padraig Healy, interview with Donald Walsh ahead of the hurling final this week. So this is a must for Plunkett's fans, supporters, family members. If you know or heard of anyone who's played for Plunkett, you'll want to read this Thursday Southern Star. So check that out. We also have an interview with Matthew Toomey ahead of the Cork's All-Ireland Camogie senior semi-final against Galway this Saturday. I just want to wish them the best of luck, as we hope the Rebels will break their Galway hoodoo and get through to the All-Ireland final. And we also have a match report and reaction to the Cork ladies footballers beating Armagh in their All-Ireland quarter-final. So great to see the two Cork teams at the business end of the championships. We have a lot of wholesome content in Thursday Star, and just a couple of them. Jerry Ryan, at 61 years of age, made his comeback for the Ballinascarty Junior B hurlers against Kilbrittain on Sunday night. I've caught up with his son Joe to talk about that, so that's well worth checking out. I'm not going to say too much more because we want people to look at the Star to get the full content. We have another great story about Munster rugby star John Hodnett. He was in Skibbereen recently with Gavin and Liam Coombs when they brought the URC trophy down to this neck of the woods. But on the way back, John Hodnett just dropped into the Carby Rangers clubhouse with the URC trophy. And there was a photo taken there of John Hodnett, and he was pictured with 4 other men, and they were called John Hodnett, John Hodnett, John Hodnett, and John Hodnett. So we've 5 John Hodnetts from the same area in the picture, and they're all related as well. So again, check out Thursday Southern Star where I explained the family tree, and it's really interesting because we've names like John Chops and John Chips, and you just want to read the Star just to get the full story here. And sticking with Ross Carberry, jockey Brian Hayes, a former Carby Rangers footballer, just like John Hodnett was. Brian Hayes was in the Royal Box, no less, at the Wimbledon singles men's final on Sunday, as Alcaraz beat Djokovic in a 5-set thriller. And there in the middle of it was the West Cork man with his partner Rachel Blackmore, sitting on the same row as James Bond, Daniel Craig, Kate Middleton and Prince William were 2 rows in front of them with their kids. So not bad for Brian Hayes from Ross Carberry to the Royal Box, but there's that story too. And we've loads more as well. We've an interview with the new Munster FA chairperson, John Buckley, who people in the West Cork League will know all about. And he's telling us just the importance of his new role, the benefits that could have and will have for West Cork soccer. I catch up with David Hart, the legendary Irish hockey goalkeeper from Ballinasspittle, who is back in the Irish setup for the first time in 4 years. And it's ahead of the European Championships 2, which are in Abbottstown, and they're starting this weekend. And that's an important competition for the Irish men's hockey team because they can book their ticket to the qualifying tournament for the Paris Olympics with a top 2 finish here. So I want to wish them the best of luck. And there's a load more beside it. We also have the Coastal Rowing Championships around the weekend, and it was a great weekend for West Cork clubs. Kilmac-Simon won club of the day with 7 wins. And again, that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much glorious West Cork sport content in there for our readers on Thursday. So like I always say, don't be that one person who misses out. Get your Star.
Yeah, don't miss out. That'll be available in shops across West Cork from Thursday morning. And as always, if you're further afield or you can't make it to the shops, you can subscribe to the Southern Star and get it on your laptop, tablet, or phone. We have that offer on at the moment where you can get 50% off your first 2 months. So that's just €1 per week for the first 8 weeks. If you subscribe, the discount code is up on screen now or in the description if you're listening on your podcast platform. As always, thanks for listening to the Star Sport podcast, and thanks again to our sponsors at Access Credit Union. If you've enjoyed this, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get yours. I'm off to see if I can get any odds on the name of John Hodnett's firstborn child. I think it might be John, but we'll be back again next week, and thanks for listening.